We're gonna start. Okay.
Conversations ended.
Continue, but now it's recorded.
Let me know, Meredith. We're good. Great, wonderful. Welcome to our November Housing Solutions Advisory Council meeting. We have a packed agenda with lots of great information in it, so we're so glad you're here in person or online. Hopefully we'll see a few more come in. Just quick introductions is we have a few of our Solutions Council members on this side of the room, a bunch of staff, and then a few folks online. So thank you. Just realizing she's online. I am going to go quickly through these first points because it we want to get to the meat. Does not look like we have public comment in person. Meredith, do we have anybody online that would like to make public comment?
Just have Kent online, and I believe he is observing.
Great, perfect, thank you. Then we will just move right along to our subcommittee updates, which is always fun. Zoe, would you like to start?
Sure. So we met Wednesday the 13th, the performance evaluation subcommittee, and we continue the conversation about our coordinated entry club that we have in the system. Justin did a amazing presentation about it, and then we provide some feedback. And he also presented about the latest MAC report, and the OHCS MAC report, and where we're at on that. I've been supported to the emergency order, and yeah.
And we have the annual report, which is what you all have.
Right, and this, yeah. Beautiful annual report. That's it.
Good, perfect. Nadia, are you doing? Yeah.
So for lived experience, we had a meeting last month. Again, lived experience meets quarterly. So this was, the focus of this group was on coordinated entry, and we partnered with Homebase, which is this organization that's been working on getting feedback around coordinated entry systems. It was a pretty good session. We will update with like more detailed notes when we have them. Hannah, she was there for a moment.
She's switching devices
Okay.
right at this moment.
I don't know if, I think that was it, but if she wants to add anything, she can. And then we're also adding hack to subcommittee updates because
Perfect.
yeah, I wanted
Great.
to.
Should I go? Or
Yes,
are we
please,
waiting
Dina.
for it? Okay, this stuff might be a little bit repetitive for later, but I just wanted to, because there's just a lot of cross collaboration happening. The housing forum is tomorrow. Yay! I'm
So excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
There wasn't there?
I'm excited for
call.
that as well. Yeah. Well, I know who's coming.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Yeah, I just want to thank the planning team, obviously Nicole and Nadia and Jess were part of that. So just wanted to share their appreciation and all the work that they do. Looking forward to it. You know, we're always wanting input or feedback, so we can come at a later meeting of like, hey, how did that go? You know, y'all were really very instrumental in figuring out who we were bringing to the table. So really appreciate that. And then hack stuff, we elected a new chair and a vice chair for 2025, which is really exciting. Ryan Kane is our vice chair, has a little bit of real estate background, a current member, and then our new chair is Melinda Bell, who was currently or is still currently our vice chair, but will be our chair now. So and she's a participant of our public housing. So just excited to have her representation and leadership. She's really stepped up a lot. So excited about that. Our October meeting had a financial update, which we try to do quarterly, just standard, like where are we? Nothing major there. Liz Morris, our rental assistance division manager, gave an update around voucher funding and utilization. It was just good to see like where are funds coming from? What does that look like? And what does that mean for Hawk? Housing Authority of Washington County. And so we did talk about shortfall, which tends to happen in like housing authorities, and is pretty, like, it's something that happens, and, you know, about housing authorities across the country prepare for this, you know, there's funds for that, there's like a line item that supports with that. And so, yeah, just talking a little bit about that, just like more informational 101. And then, yeah, I think everything else, Housing Choice Voucher Program celebrated its 50th anniversary. So there was something around that, just kind of appreciating the program and the work that we do with our Housing Choice Voucher Program, which helps low-income families, individuals, seniors, and people with disabilities. And then we talked about our Section 18 disposition, which, if you don't know, 60 homes are being sold, firstly to the residents, offered to the residents, and then to nonprofits, community-based organizations who help first-time home buyers, low-income folks, anyone who's looking to purchase a home. So we're excited about that. These homes are not in good condition. You know, our hope is that the funds will be used to continue building more affordable housing. And so our residents are going to be supported with a relocation specialist. So we're doing all of that work right now. It's a lot of work, but the team has been amazing in doing that work. So just wanted to give an update about that. So yeah, those are all the things. We're doing stuff over there. So I just wanted to give you all an update about that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we're gonna jump right in.
Quick, Chair, if I may, we're gonna add a quick agenda item. Molly is here to just give a brief update. So if we can slot her in now, she's got another conversation to get to.
No, so. I'm just kidding. Of course, yes, Molly.
Okay, Kim, you're running a tight ship here. I like it. That's all good. Nice to see you all, although you're a little bit of a blip in my screen. So I'll try to see if I can see you. For those of you who don't know me, I am Molly Rogers. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Services, and I use she, her. There, now I can see folks, thanks. And I use she, her pronouns. I want to be able to get, it's been 1 year since I've been on the job, and I've learned a ton, but I need to learn more. And I'm realizing I want to get more time with you all as well, especially as we go through some existential sort of challenges we're facing right now with the potential of the Metro referring a package to the voters in May 2025. And you guys are gonna talk more about it later this afternoon, and Kim came to our work session, and I know many of you are tracking this pretty closely, so this might be sort of repeat, but I just wanted you to hear from me that we are here to try to make sure that your story is being told, that we have spent the last 4 years in partnership with you all in our cities to build out a comprehensive and extremely effective homeless system of care. And you have stood up programs, you've put people into housing, you've created new shelters, you've bought motels, you've done pod villages, you've done all the things in a short amount of time. And that should not go unnoticed. And we are seeing the results every day. And you guys are getting people into housing every day. And so this is definitely feeling very emotional to see Metro try to change the work that we've put forth into the community. There's a lot that every day it feels like a new number or a new thing that Metro is trying to change. So all I can, so that's why I'm needing to leave this afternoon. There's another conversation with Metro leadership. What they're trying to do ultimately is have a contract the homeless services portion of the amount of revenue coming out of SHS, so that there is additional revenue to go towards affordable housing. And right now we're hearing they're also wanting to do a carve out for, they call a city program. So, and they want to see tax relief. So we keep saying, there's no such thing as doing more with less. It's actually less with less. So we're trying to be trying to bring facts to a table in a situation that we need to make sure we are being really clear of what we're doing, being really clear what we will not be able to do, and be really clear of the impact of people right now seeking housing, and right now people are trying to build projects and to elevate those concerns and those issues. So our board is very committed to make sure our whole team, with large, that includes you all, is supported through this work, and then we can maintain a system of care that is responsive to those who are experiencing homelessness in Washington County and does not lose ground. There is concern that Metro is proposing changes that will make us what we think of as going backwards, like potentially changing the way capital investments are decided, changing the way that say affordable housing developers would need to go and seek capital resources. There's just a lot of moving pieces, and it's I know the team will go into a deeper dive of what we know today. We're just going to have to keep updating you as we learn more over the next couple months. They are telling us that they want to have the Metro Council refer some kind of package by the end of this calendar year. It could go into the beginning of 2025. I think Jess has told us it could go probably until February to be able to make a May ballot, roughly about that. So we do hope there's still opportunities for you all to share your voice and to share your concerns and to have those and make sure that you're explaining what this measure has done for the people you see every day, and that depending on what level of diversion or level of cuts that they are proposing, that we can then quickly be able to tell a story of what that could really mean on the ground, and with real people, with actual people who are that we're seeing in our shelters and our housing. So we are still, the numbers change literally daily in terms of what Metro is thinking they may want to propose as what our base homeless services system would look like. It could be as severe as them going back saying we want us to go back to that $250 million initial forecast of when we referred the measure in 2020. There's talk of escalation of say 3% each year, and of course, as we all know, our expenses and our rents don't just escalate at 3% a year. They escalate at a higher rate. So we're trying to elevate those sort of issues. And then we also want to make sure that if there is funds diverted towards affordable housing, that we still can maintain some services and some rent assistance for our own Pop A and Pop B populations to be able to get access into that affordable housing. We're worried that if there isn't that kind of balanced approach, we create either only shelters for people experiencing homelessness and then affordable housing for folks who can't actually access it, who have been homeless or don't have the right income and can't pay the rents and need those supports to be able to stay in that housing. So there is still a need for a comprehensive and integrated approach of how we do all this work. And that's the work we're doing every day here in Washington County with you in all of our various programs. So we will keep you updated as we learn more. But we're trying to just scenario plan right now. And some of the scenarios are really scary. And it's hard to, how do we figure out that right? We'll have to, if push comes, if there's a moment, we will have to make some tough choices. It's this committee, it's our CBOs, it's our city partners and our board that we will need to go through a full process to guide us on making those decisions.
Thank you, Molly. If you're having a moment of anxiety or the hairs on the back of your neck stood up, that means good, lean into this. This is a conversation as a solutions council, you should be participating in and following and understanding the repercussions of what changes that Metro are proposing could affect us directly as the agencies and can affect our homeless friends directly. I can't emphasize enough the need for not only the people on this council and our other councils, but also our executive directors to be engaged in these conversations. Jess is going to be coming to the executive director roundtable Monday afternoon to speak into it as well. There is a need now to understand and be vocal and utilize our collective voice and our singular voices before this train keeps going. We need to stop the damn train is what we need to do. So,
Yep, thank you for that. And that's a good reminder. Actually, I think even Angie, our county administrator, and I believe Marnie Kyle, our assistant county administrator, will also be there on Monday. So we have the full support. You have full leadership of Washington County shining this light and saying, we need to make sure we don't dismantle this incredible homeless system that you have all built. So we will, there'll be more to come. I will try to be there if I can. I have a medical appointment, but we'll see. But well, thanks for saying that, Kim. And I'm gonna head out and keep preparing for.
Molly,
Thank you.
I was just at a meeting with Commissioner Fye, and the words out of her mouth was the goal will, if there has to be change, the goal will to be with as little effect to the service providers as possible. So to Molly's point, there is great support from our board and our SHS staff trying to do what's good and right here, which is a term I use a lot. And we're thankful. Thank you for your time, energy, and sleepless nights, Molly. So
Yeah.
I'm going to sleep tomorrow.
there you go.
Bye, everyone. See you maybe tomorrow.
Bye.
We're gonna give the floor over to Jess Larson to talk about the SHS budget discussion. Yes or no? Yes?
I'm gonna take that part. So
Nicole is
switching.
gonna take that part. I wanna at least kind of make the distinction that we're having two different conversations right now, two very important different conversations right now. The Metro conversation that Molly just laid out for us, and then this is specific to supportive housing services in current, what's happening today timeframe. Sometimes I think they get intertwined when it's not very clear, and so just want to lay that foundation, please. So yes.
Thank you. And just for our public record, my name is Nicole Singh. I use she her pronouns with Washington County. I'm here to bring back what I think is probably the third or fourth, I can't quite recall, time we brought forward to you a conversation around SHS's budget and the programmatic reductions that we're considering, given the change in forecast the change in collection versus the forecast from previous years. Just to get us all on the same page about this, we're here because we noticed where we saw a $6 million shortfall or gap in forecasted revenue versus collected revenue. And we're understanding that we'll need to necessarily reduce our ongoing programmatic commitments to be at a more conservative level to address the volatility in the tax source. We've talked about the measure. We're going to skip that for now. Kim is right. They're separate conversations. And it's important for us to keep them separate. So we know that regardless of what's happening over there, we still have to undergo programmatic reductions. We want to do it in a way that's thoughtful and best for our community. There's some cost saving measures that are currently underway. We've paused the development of new programs. That's a shallow subsidy program. We are planning for the sunset of temporary programs that was just brought to you last week. That is our hotel or voucher or motel voucher shelter beds, as well as eviction prevention. We're also doing our best to reduce internal admin costs kind of immediately. So that looks like not going up to our contracted amount with our consultants and maybe doing more things in-house or taking things off our plate. And then we're also undergoing system rebalancing and talking about what are the right portions of things in our system. That's what you saw on the slides, and that's what we'll spend most of our conversation with today. I know many of you are eager to dive into the numbers. we're hoping to get that to you in December. Right now, we want to start with the foundation of first we did our values, and now we're heading into what is it we want from our system. Then let's look at the numbers and use those foundational conversations to guide our discussion. And speaking of guiding our discussion, I want to remind you of our guiding principles. Our board has seen these a number of times. Oh, that was just one more part. Our board has seen them a number of times. No, you're all right. And has made a few tweaks and adjustments. I'm not going to read them over again. I'll just highlight a few things. The population A-B split is important. That's 75% of resources going to folks that are in population A. This isn't the exact definition, but essentially folks that are chronically homeless, have a disabling condition and experience homelessness. Of course, we want to address or apply an equity lens as we make any programmatic reductions. And we need to focus on system flow through and the quality of our system. So we're bringing the best quality service we can with the resources we have that allow people to move from unsheltered homelessness into shelter and then ultimately into permanent housing. I also want to reiterate this, Molly mentioned it, but I want to say it loud. We've made capital investments to a number of projects, and we want to uphold those capital investments and support those capital investments by prioritizing those projects for ongoing resources. So if we helped you build it in the first place, we want to make sure we can continue supporting it as much as we can. And then, of course, as both Molly and Kim have uplifted, this is also about making sure we're lessening impact on those we serve and on providers. The other thing I want you to keep in mind as we go through this conversation is the Solutions Council role. So we're coming to you for guidance and advice. We want to make sure we're taking that as staff are having conversations and bringing potential decision items to the Board of County Commissioners. We also want your advice on the coordination of investments. We'll focus mostly on that guidance piece of the SHS investments, but we have other funds that we do leverage, including continuum of care funds. You all talked with the community development folks about the emergent ESG here, the Emergency Solutions Grant conversation. And there's other state, local, and federal funds to address homelessness that we don't want to forget about as we have this conversation. Right, one more just a reminder foundational slide just in terms of our budget process. We received direction from the Board of County Commissioners to budget on the more conservative end of the model, which is part of the reason why we're here. We're planning on bringing monthly conversations back to you all and using that to guide our budget development process. And in late January, early February is when we actually have to submit a budget to the central office. So we submit that budget. There's a number of internal review processes that we go through as a county before the Board of County Commission opines on the budget and ultimately approves it ahead of July 1st in the new fiscal year.
When do they normally approve it? Like, so you guys turn it in by February, they take it for a little while, and then what's the approval?
June, is it?
Yeah, it's usually,
June,
it's
right before,
like
okay.
end of May, early
Great.
June.
Great.
And the distance between February and June is more about internal county, like aligning all of the admin and all of the details are sort of beyond our programmatic work.
Right.
So in lots of ways, the February date is
okay.
the objective.
Great, great.
All right, now to get into the discussion of proportionality. So we've grown our system with new resources. We've I think appropriately responded with urgency to the crisis on the street and the new resources as they came in. And now that we're in this moment of programmatic reductions, it's the right time to pause and say, what do we want from our system? What do we need from our system? And how do we uphold the commitments we made in our local implementation plan? So I want to, on the left column there, you see the goals that were in our local implementation plan. So for each of these, you'll note we've gone above and beyond that because we've gotten additional resources. So we've really exceeded all of these goals. We have over 1,600 slots, over 1,700 slots actually of permanent supportive housing funded with SHS and additional resources funded with COC. And then on the right is our current system. I want to uplift, this is our total current system. This is not just SHS resources. So for the most part, it's not too different. There are a few places where it's fairly divergent. There's a couple hundred PSH slots that are funded with continuum of care resources, same with enhanced rapid housing. It's really only a handful of shelter beds that don't have some type of supportive housing services funds touching them. But to take that step back, we have over 430 shelter units in our system, almost 2,000 permanent supportive housing slots with an additional 100 or with additional 100, over 100 actually, supportive transitional housing units that are slated to be created. We've multiple outreach teams, we have 2 funded access centers with 2 more to be funded, housing liaisons, shelter liaisons, and others to get folks moving through the system. And we have eviction prevention resources that while they're ending this year have been an important resource, as well as over 700 rapid rehousing slots.
Can we ask questions throughout or
Absolutely.
just, and I don't know, it's just an I don't know moment. The goal for shelter beds was 250, but clearly exceeded that, which I'm a big fan of. What was the driver behind that to keep increasing shelter beds when the goal was already met?
Increased resources is the short answer.
Great, okay, yeah.
I'll give maybe a bit more nuance in that the governor's executive order really was it was a charge the county took incredibly seriously. And the third piece I'll give is we have a number of kind of temporary shelter units online. The Beaverton temporary shelter is a good example of that. It will be closing this month as folks move into the Beaverton permanent shelter. Hillsborough also has a similar temporary shelter that will close in as the permanent opens.
It was the executive order that changed the shelters to become year-round, right?
Many, yes.
Okay.
May I jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
I would also add Project Turnkey is a big consideration here. We didn't have those projects in our view when the SHS measure was first preferred. And we've been very fortunate to add 3 here in Washington County, and all 3 needed ongoing operations once they were required. And so thank goodness we had those resources. Right now they are all being operated as emergency shelters, but there's some consideration there, like what's the highest and best use of those, those buildings that are a part of our system.
I'll pause for clarifying questions before I move on from the slide, but before I move on from the slide, I also want to explain what you're about to see. You saw those pie charts in the slides that were sent out on Friday. These are coming from a meeting of the homeless services lead. So these are the folks that lead key parts of our work, from our data team to folks over coordinated entry to folks over program or access programs, housing programs, and Jess, myself, and our leadership team as well. And folks came together to ask the question, what if you had a dream system, what would you look like? We were literally playing with Monopoly pieces to help our brains get in that space, thinking, these red ones are going to represent emergency shelter, these orange ones are going to represent alternative shelter. I don't remember the exact colors, but the gist is the same, that we built a system with a concrete number of kind of slots we could build. We had little houses to play with, and we thought, what does it look like to meet the goals of system flow through? And what is our system that we need in Washington County? Now, staff used each of the 3 teams that did this. Staff had a person with coordinated entry data on hand, so that was part of how we looked at what to build. And then each team took their own unique perspectives and experiences into the system. As you saw, they were fairly similar, but there's also some really key differences throughout. So before we move on, I'll take that one more pause and see if there's any questions on where we've been so far. I'm also looking on screen as well.
Can you refresh my memory on Project Turnkey?
Yeah, sure. It was a state conceived, funded opportunity that partnered with Oregon Community Foundation. And it's been a statewide effort to acquire hotels for the purpose of primarily of emergency shelter, but some have taken the shape of transitional housing and some have taken the shape of permanent supportive housing. But it was all about the capital effort to acquire these hotels for emergency housing purposes. And it looks different all over the state. And we're really one of the lucky counties to have as many projects as we do, but also now a responsible county for making sure they stay open and operated for them.
And this was all state funded?
The acquisition was,
Gotcha.
yeah, there
And
was.
then the support is SHS funded?
Yeah, I want to be very specific for you, Tim, because you're also on our oversight committee, so I want to make sure I get these details right. I believe that like the acquisition of the Tigard Hotel that is operated or owned by Family Promise was about 11 million, and that SHS put in 2 million to help close that deal. I don't know the price of Casa Amparo. That was done before SHS had carryover funds, but we did invest a few $100,000 or maybe almost $1 million in renovations to stabilize the property and provide sprinklers and things like that. And then similarly at Bridge Shelter, which is owned by the county, it's in Hillsborough. That was all acquired with Project Turnkey, but we have used SHS one-time funds to help with an emergency roof repair. The roof almost caved in. So that's capital. And then all three of them are almost fully funded with SHS operations.
Right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm gonna walk through each of the three teams, and then we'll take a look at our current system, and then we'll compare all of those 4 systems together. This one I feel great talking about because I was actually on this team, so it's easy for me to remember the conversation. You'll see the values for each of these. You'll see values and strategies on the left with the pie chart on the right. Yes.
Did we skip present?
Oh, we
Hold tight.
reordered it, so that'll come at the end, before at the last example.
A surprise.
Oh, yes, yes, and thank you for reading the material to catch that. So, what we cared a lot about in our system was moving people into permanent housing as an ultimate goal and helping the system flow to get people to permanent housing. So that's why you notice half of our system is permanent housing, with rapid rehousing, kind of assuming that is a population B support to move folks through the system. In building our system, we planned for shelter units to be about 1/3 families, 1/3 kind of special shelter, so pods or the low acuity treatment shelter beds, and then 1/3 of it as emergency shelter for folks on the street. We also planned for transitional housing, with half being recovery based and half being stabilization based. And you might recall from many months ago when we talked about our transitional housing info, the stabilization based recovery housing is for folks with maybe co-occurring needs, but focus mostly on folks with acute behavioral health needs. So thinking that if we have our system of transitional housing, we'll have about half for folks in recovery and half for folks with behavioral health needs. And we also looked at a majority of permanent housing being tenant-based, and some with about 1/4 as site-based. So when we built out our system, we were thinking about that flow through where folks might want to be, and thinking a bit about what was already in our system and what we could take advantage of. And you'll notice kind of one of our strategy was to let the sites be the sites. And when it comes to population specific needs, that's when we would leverage population specific needs through the programming at the sites. So that's why I chatted through the kind of proportionality within each of the buckets, because that was part of how we had our conversation. All right, we'll go to group 2. This group leaned a bit more on permanent housing, you'll see, and had very little in transitional housing. They were focused on youth and family homelessness, wanting to solve chronic homelessness and again, system flow through. The focus on PSH and families was really to get at what we all knew and upheld, which was the 75%-25% split as required by the supportive housing services measure. And they also talked about diversion programs to get folks out of our system. That could be eviction prevention, that could be other resources, as well as wanting to keep folks in permanent housing. So their system is their shelter system, they said, was half for families and the rest for individuals. When their transitional housing that they have here is all stabilization based, they felt recovery housing should be handled by a different system. They had a pretty large, as you know, a fairly large rapid rehousing investment. And then for their supportive housing, they thought about 1/4 of that would be for families and only about 1/3 of that would be site-based. One thing I forgot to mention from our first group is we also talked about the need to have access centers and kind of set some of our capacity on an access center. This group felt the need to call out additional short-term and kind of more flexible solutions. So the move-in only program and rapid rental assistance that doesn't come with wraparound service or part of the program or the system that they built. All right, and the last one here is where you see the most divergence. And the thought here is that a lot of the shelter we're operating right now, or my recollection from this group is a lot of the shelter that we're operating right now is acting more as if it's transitional housing. So that's why you see theirs have a much larger portion of transitional housing, because they're thinking about the shelter we're operating as kind of working like transitional housing now, we have a lot of folks that are staying over 100 days in our shelter system. And there comes to be a point when we need to think about that line between shelter and transitional housing, just as we're thinking about the line between the transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. It's a bit of a gray scale that people can move through.
Can I jump in?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
also remember that similar, maybe this is what you were saying, I missed it. Rapid rehousing was similar, like there's a
Mhm.
lot of people getting 2 years of assistance, but
Mhm.
that's the kind of operating as transitional support in those 2 years. It's not resulting in a permanent
Mhm.
housing outcome because they actually need more.
Yeah.
So basically the pie for transitional is growing because the assumption is less rapid rehousing
Mhm.
and less emergency shelter, because that's effectively who we're serving in our system right now.
Thank you. Yes, that's, you're absolutely correct. That was part of their, so it's on kind of both the rapid rehousing and shelter is where their transitional housing has grown. So they didn't dictate kind of what the shelter breakdown would be, but they did dictate what their transitional housing breakdown would be. They thought a fourth for families, a fourth for medically vulnerable, and a half would be that stabilization for folks with severe and persistent mental health needs. We've talked about, their rapid rehousing is the smallest of anyone, recognizing that the folks we're serving in rapid rehousing would probably be better served in transitional housing. And they also mentioned, they talked a lot about the need for diversion resources to keep people out of our system, or if folks need just a bit of a hand up to get out of the system through move-in only assistance or other flexible funds, that was something they felt was really important to invest in. So keeping these three systems in mind, their similarity and differences, I want to go to our current system now, which looks very different. In our current system, as I walked through, we have a number of shelter beds. We have 430 shelter beds. We have, what that tiny little line you see there is like 20 or 30 transitional housing units that are funded with our continuum of care resources. That large chunk of rapid rehousing is mostly SHS funded, and then for permanent supportive housing, all but I think it's like 1,700 units are funded by 1,700 units rather are funded by the continuum of care, and the rest is SHS funded. So when you look at the system, it looks fairly different. And again, our system was built out with the key value of getting resources out quickly to serve people in need. We use the local implementation plan as our base, and as more resources came in, we thought, great, let's get people housed and moved very quickly. Yes, Drew.
For this purpose, well, I guess in general, what do you see the difference between transitional housing and rapid rehousing?
So the key difference in kind of the way to think about it is transitional housing is a site-based 2-year housing program. Rapid rehousing is a 2-year voucher. And Jim's smiling because he asked me the same question over email before this meeting. So rapid rehousing also doesn't come with quite the same level of wraparound services as the transitional housing that we're envisioning here. So some transitional housing doesn't have that, has more akin to the light touch that we have with rapid rehousing. What we're envisioning is more of a deeper transitional housing that has that wraparound service.
Site-based.
Yeah.
I'd also offer this, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding. That with rapid rehousing, we've designed it after the federal program. So the tenant is signing a lease and they're responsible for that lease at the end of the 2-year rent assistance. And it's also being recorded as a permanent housing placement. It's defined that way. So what's tricky is if it's not actually providing that permanent stability, we're setting folks up for a precarious, okay, thank you.
We have both rapid rehousing and transitional living programs, and those are key differences between the two of our programs. Yeah, that makes good sense. Right. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Fundamentally, they seem very similar, but that's
The other thing I'll butt in here with is this pie represents about 3,000 slots. And when we gave our teams the challenge of the Monopoly game, they only had 500 slots. So I think that's just kind of interesting psychology to work into, like, you know, this is all very, well, not this slide, but the others were very theoretical. And it wasn't meant to be perfect, but it is interesting to see the thinking around if you only had 500 slots, and then the reality around, well, we actually have about 3,000, and this is what it looks like right now in Washington County.
Eviction prevention is just sort of not in the picture here.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we focus on slot capacity. So eviction prevention doesn't quite represent slot capacity in the same way here. And then, yes, the conversation decision has already been made as we've shared, but eviction prevention funded with carryover resources is not continuing as part of SHS ongoing funds.
But that was a theme throughout. Every single group
Mhm.
said, what about flex funds? What about move-in funds? We also need this. And that, I would say this was an exercise and it was imperfect. And what was clear is we also need to make sure we have enough of our funding pie. This is a slot pie, if you will, a slot capacity pie, but we have to make sure there's enough of a funding pie to give those flexible emergency response resource, put those into our system. So there are other tools beyond just the beds or the units in our system.
Well, the next slide has some comparisons, and keep the questions coming. Because along with the questions you have, Nadia, next slide there. The questions you have, I wanted you to think about. Oh, it would have been, oh, I thought we would go back.
So
Maybe
one
try
with
one
all
more.
the pies.
There we go.
There you go.
Oh, no, I was supposed to walk through our current system first. Sorry. Oh, no, wait, no, we
You
did
just
that.
did,
We
you
did
did,
that.
you
Okay,
did,
thank
you
you.
did.
Thank you.
You're doing great.
I forgot about it.
Great.
Great, so here is the three comparisons, the current system on the left with 1, 2, and 3. So along with any questions you may have, I'm just curious, what system is resonating with you and why? Are there any that you're like, oh gosh, no, or any that you're like, okay, that feels right. We wanted to hear from you all, what feels right for what you see and what you hear in the community.
Sorry, always questions. So how can permanent supportive housing be modulated? I mean, it's permanent supportive housing. Haven't you signed the deed and isn't this people that are there that you have to support? How can it be, how can that be cut?
It's
Not
great
cut,
question. Permanent supportive housing in our system has 2 forms right now. We call them tenant-based and project-based. And actually, this is pretty consistent across all systems too, because there's some federal funds like Shelter Plus Care that operates as primarily a tenant-based program. So that means the voucher is held by the tenant and they can move anywhere in the market and that will buy their rent down. And the way we can modulate is if they stop using that voucher, they graduate from needing that level of care or pass away or something happens that they no longer need that, then the system can, through attrition, absorb those vouchers back in, and we could, decide to decrease that capacity of the system to offer that many vouchers. And part of our strategy as a system is, as more buildings come online, turn those tenant-based vouchers that are no longer needed, or that we have a regular pace of attrition that happens every year from turnovers, and turn them from tenant-based into project-based, and then you have more of an enriched service program that is site-based. So we do have a system-wide goal to move towards more permanent-based programming, similar to a system-wide goal to add transitional housing, because you get a lot of enriched services on site. But because we grew quickly and we needed to get people housed as quickly as possible, we used the market to make that happen. So both rapid rehousing and most of our permanent supportive housing right now in Washington County are relying on renting units in the market with tools that buy down the rent. But you're right to wonder, like, if we actually have physical buildings, you can't move the system in the same way, because now you gotta you're obligated. Yeah.
I would be curious, probably can't do this, maybe there's a way. I know you couldn't give out everyone monopoly pieces. I would be curious how the pies fell from our partner agencies.
I'm gonna speak for that, and I can see a lot of the current system of people in the, it's a great, the rapid housing, a lot of them moving to the blue. Because of the housing first, and whatever is available, which is COC or Emergency Solutions Grant or the enhanced rapid rehousing. Usually we're putting participants who will not sustain after those 2 years, and then they have to move, and we move them to a more longer permanent solution. So yeah, that makes total sense. So if we work with them on the 3, expanding that transitional housing support. And that's with case management intense, because COC requires it, ESG requires it. I don't know, enhanced secondary housing, but it's still, it's not manageable by a household. Very few are successful, and they are success. But I kind of like the third buy, I mean, at least to pilot it and see how effective we are in moving people from transitional housing with all the support they need.
We have a question online.
Diana?
Hi, everyone. I also kind of want to like piggyback off of what, oh my God, I'm so bad with names. But what she was saying, because the transitional housing is what we see the most here, since it does require a lot more case management, and for folks to transition over to permanent and supportive housing, we do see that it takes a lot longer for them to get established, to get a job, to retrain, or to go into a different field. So I also want to say I can see most of our organizations kind of identifying with the group 3 pie chart as well.
The only place that I have seen any reports on people coming into the system was the Oregonian article this week that actually gave some numbers, which we have not been able to have here. Basically saying each county has this many people exiting the program and this many people coming in. So my question is, who are the people that are coming in, and which of these services are they going to need the most? Because that's going to make an influence what you need to have.
Just want to quickly point out.
How did I miss a graph?
On page 24,
Oh.
the attachment, Jim, this was buried in the 73-page full report. We pulled out some of the attachments in the shorter printed version. This is one of the ones that got pulled out. So
Oh, okay.
the inflow and outflow is there, and you see, oh, it looks like I couldn't start to see. There's folks that have kind of moved through, and the outflow is detailed, and then inflow isn't broken out, but what we saw from doing the review was more about population base. I don't have it in front of me. It is a report. The staff are planning on bringing this report to you all. Did you hear from Heather if December was feasible for them?
No.
There's other, but
Okay. So there's a plan to bring it forward. That what I would offer is, I don't remember the details, and I was not the holder of the data, but for each of the 3 groups, they did have access to the Community Connect data, so they were seeing what were folks calling for, what needs were they presenting as the different systems were built. So I think what Jess uplifted about group 3 and the rapid rehousing piece to me is the most demonstrative of what's happening in the system, and what Zoe uplifted, that a lot of folks that are in need of, or that are accessing transitional housing, are actually folks that just don't quite reach to the top for permanent supportive housing and are in need of more assistance and supports, and wouldn't be able to be successful after 2 years. So the proportionality here, I think, is fairly based off of how each team looked at the data, and we'll get you more data hopefully for our next conversation with the teams.
I mean, the last thing that I meant specifically is that, you know, when you see the shelter proportion getting smaller and smaller, you know, is what is that going to do to our whole system? You know, are we going to not be able to have access to these other pieces if we shrink that piece?
Well, I'm seeing it as people will not stay as long on the brown area, which
Okay,
to me
and
is
they move to black
success.
areas, so yeah, I
Exactly.
like that, okay.
So because the solution is not shelter, so I'm thinking the 3 is what a system that it should work, you know, less people in shelter and more people on permanent or transitional housing, and few on short-term solution, you know, those that needs 2, 3 months, 4 months, or have a voucher, section a voucher, and we help them with deposit and moving out of the system.
Yeah,
I
I
also
totally agree with group 3. I think like getting people out of shelters and getting people into houses, whether they're transitional or, you know, it's just setting them up for success in a way that like, it also offers safety in a way that sometimes shelters can't, you know, so it's like while opening up more transitional housing, it also prepares people for permanent supportive housing, because not all permanent supportive housing requires people to do services. So it's like, when you have people in transitional housing, there's case management, there's a lot of times there's staff that live on site. There's so many options to help people really get set up for success for whatever their next step is, while also recognizing we still need to have rapid rehousing. We still need to have some of that, but definitely like getting people set up with having case managers with lived experience, having all of the wraparound support when they're able to live in these houses where, sometimes, stabilization programs usually aren't very long, but transitional housing, there's people that live in them for a couple years. And then once they've gained skills, they've learned how to live in housing again, because that's another big thing, is like going from living in a shelter to living in a house. That's a huge transition period. And then living in a, community-based house where you're able to like start engaging with others, starting to, kind of recenter yourself into doing something different. And then a lot of times you see people that like just kind of continue to fall through the cracks. And with transitional housing, there's so many different options of kinds of housing that can be offered. And so it's not like a cookie cutter option either. In my thoughts.
So is there an implication on how I'm kind of like, I kind of like the big black thing too, and the fact that you don't have a little black thing in your current is just a disaster. But how does that affect monetarily? Monetarily, how does that affect, which of these are more, which of these are the most cost effective or the most costly to perform? If you increase your transitional housing, are you actually also increasing your costs for all the services that you want?
Excellent.
Yeah, and we'll have a little bit of that kind of cost analysis when we bring the numbers forward, but even within each bar, the cost of interventions isn't the same. Pod shelter sites are much more expensive than congregate shelter. So even within those buckets, you're seeing different things. What I might offer just in terms of, thinking about transitional housing is we have an ability to potentially leverage Medicaid funding for operational support with transitional housing that doesn't exist currently in other types of our interventions. We think we can get there with permanent supportive housing, but that's the key is transitional housing. We might be able to get money from other systems.
I wouldn't bet the farm on your Medicare funding, because there's these guys.
Oh, that's
Who said yesterday,
thought
I
this
was
was
in
a
a
safe
meeting
space.
yesterday, and Dr. Oz is gonna fix everything.
Oh, well, I might offer in terms of that speculation, Jim, that it takes a long time to undo government systems. So that's what I'm holding on to in this moment. It's a great part. And what I'll also say is folks recall, we ran a transitional housing NOFO. We're getting ready to go to the board on December 3rd with recommendations. I can't share what those recommendations are yet, but I can share it is 119 units that came forward that were really funding. Both projects leveraged Medicaid. They would leverage Medicaid in their proposal, and were quite a bit more cost effective than some of the other things we have in our system. So we'll have more of that when we bring forward the numbers to think about the cost effectiveness. But for the conversation and for this, we kind of wanted to be blind to numbers and think about what does the system need, and then we'll bring in the numbers and then keep adding layers of complexity. All right, well, for the sake of time, I'm gonna move us on because I do want to make sure Jess can run through the full measure. But here, the unknowns are what we've been living with. We don't yet know the final number, and we don't yet know what any potential revenue from looks like. Of course, there's separate conversations, but should something move forward, a revenue reduction measure move forward, it will impact what we are working on here, of course. It will have degrees of severity in terms of the reductions we're considering. So that's a huge unknown. I'll just point out, some of you were able to attend the Beaverton Shelter grand opening Monday. It hasn't officially opened, it'll open next month, but we're doing the fun. Everyone come see this beautiful purpose-built building. I'll make the plug starting at 4 o'clock today. There's an open house. If you didn't get the chance to stop and see it, stop by the Beaverton Shelter. Come to me after, we'll get you that address, but we're really excited about it. And the next
Can I just, I'm just gonna, just to share, so one of the plans that we're putting together is the gentleman who did this mural, has another mural that's gonna be happening at the Beaverton shelter. And then, the other shelters and access centers are also gonna ask him to do their murals, so we can continue his story throughout.
Oh, I love that.
Can we just be, before, he has a gorgeous story, so, we're excited to share it. Before we move on to Metro, I don't know, I'm gonna say publicly, I guess. I have concerns about the transitional housing NOFO moving forward while we're making reductions to SHS programmatic pieces affecting our clients and our staff in some pretty big ways. I'm just gonna, my board will probably be making a public statement before the December 3rd meeting around that. If we go back to the pies, if you look at group 3, which I'm in agreement with, absolutely where we need to be going. In my brain, the shift is utilizing some of the shelter funding and some of that rapid rehousing funding to then start implementing this transitional housing thought, which is the key piece here that we've all already caught on to. So I do like the direction we're going. It's shifting current funds to help start meeting that goal, putting a pause on what we potentially have on the docket until we know better what's gonna happen with Metro and understand our forecast for particularly next year, when we're talking about a $10 to $15 million reduction. I know you said no numbers, but there they are. And so I just at least wanted to say that out loud, that some of the partner agencies have great concern over moving forward with something that is an increase to long-term programmatic funding while we're talking about decreasing in other areas.
And I might offer, just so we're all tracking, the staff recommendation for the transition housing awards is contingent upon a potential measure. So
did we get the forecast?
We don't have it yet.
Still?
It's now due December 2nd.
When Kim gets quiet, that means there's things that are ahead. Okay, that's frustrating.
We have one more slide just on this, the one more, I think, yeah, just to remind us of the timeline before we move on. We'll continue to have iterative budget conversations. We had those value-based discussions. We continued that with thinking about the system. December, we're hoping to bring you high-level numbers. The proposal is probably not going to happen, but some high-level numbers to look at, and we'll have the new revenue forecast figures. And then in January is when we'll be thinking about what does this look like and what are we putting in the budget to the board. So the providers are being engaged. Kind of the Metro revenue budget, the potential revenue reduction measure is changing the timeline a bit because we're prioritizing those conversations first with providers. But we'll continue to have this conversation. You'll hear about it monthly, and as folks know, Jess and I's email inbox is always open, and we're happy to connect for coffee or other things.
Can I ask a question about the provider stuff? Are y'all engaging with HISM?
We're planning for this conversation, for the budget conversation.
Yeah,
Probably not. Just timing is challenging. But we are using the listening session conversations and
yeah. I have to go have another thing. Thanks, y'all.
That's true.
See y'all tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. I'm not seeing any questions. I will turn things back to you, Chair, who I'm sure will quickly turn things over to Jess for the potential revenue reform conversation.
That's me.
Do you not recognize the word chair?
Right. Welcome back.
So we can get you to run for
I
office.
wanna do this. Maybe that was it, maybe subconsciously. I
That's
didn't
why
think-
you
yeah,
were
exactly. I was like,
like,
now let's move on to other fun stuff like the housing forum. Okay, so yes, we do, yeah, let's keep plugging away. I think it's important information. And the other thing I'm gonna say here is, Solutions Council, these become public knowledge, and there's links to these meetings within a few days. Is that safe to say? Send it out to your counterparts and folks, so that they can be informed as well about discussions. And same thing with the Metro conversation. Share. Okay, back to Jess Larson.
Well, thank you, Kim.
Sorry.
And actually, before we move into the measure, I just want to thank you all for this discussion. I found that really helpful, and I'm curious to what you think about that kind of that structure for thinking about the balance of our system, because we will be making we have to, as staff, propose a balanced budget, and the board has directed us to balance it with the more conservative forecast. And so that's why we're anticipating $10 to $15 million. And that has to happen, right? But how we build our pie, I believe, is an iterative, ongoing, year over year, like, and we're not gonna build that pie no matter what we think today. It's not gonna be here to next year, right? This is a longer term transition towards a more perfect system that I hope is the journey and the work that we're on together forever. And so if that was a useful exercise, and who else needs to participate in that exercise, or how else do we do that? I hope we keep doing that, because I found that very valuable to listen and really just hear how transitional housing is resonating with you all as a gap in our system right now. And how we get there with capital, and how we get there, the infrastructure is an important question. But also there's the programmatic and the design of our system to meet the needs of the people who you are all serving every day in one of your programs. So I just really value that.
And then Jess, I think that for me, it like speaks to why we need to continue this SHS funding at the capacity it's at, because we're just now going, okay, we built this system, and we need to make some tweaks. This maybe isn't working as well as we'd hoped it did. And this is what we're hearing from our partner agencies, and this is what our clientele needs, and all these pieces. And we're year 4. And so it only reiterates to me the need to be able to continue to do this work so that we can make the appropriate tweaks to do the system as well as we possibly can. Thank you, Metro.
And I also wanna add that the way I see it, the current system it's kind of like how we should move.
Right.
But the two should be one, and then one,
Oh, I see.
two.
It's like a
and then
slow transition.
Yeah.
Our North Star, whatever that is.
That's interesting.
How many years it is, should be the.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah. Good visual.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move through.
Mhm.
So this is a really hard time. I also, and Molly kind of framed a bunch of it for us. I also want to share something really specific and direct with you all, that our staff team, county and public employees, can only engage in this conversation until the day it is referred. And once the measure is referred, it is left up to people who are not public officials to engage in the conversation for voters to make their decision at the May ballot. So the work that Molly is doing, the presentation I'm about to give, the information we've prepared is work we can only do until the measure is referred. And that's why we're working so hard to get the information in your hands, to get the information out there for the public, so that information is there when it's needed. I think it's been a long year. We've been having this conversation. It began back there some time ago in the fall of 2023 with Metro Council asking staff to begin this conversation. And that first step, you may recall, they facilitated a stakeholder table series where I'm not sure who from our community was invited. Our chair sat there. Kim, I want to thank you. I think you attended every single meeting and often sat next to me. So there was a lot of careful attention to that conversation. And in the end, all of that work from March till May, and all the conversations at that table and outside of that table led to Metro deciding not to refer the measure in August. But they did decide that they want to continue on. They just weren't ready. They didn't have clarity on what to refer in November. That's how that was their public communication or public framing of it. Metro Council then began the conversations again, in more of a political context, if you will. I think the counties have, the staffing conversation has been more, less and less and more political conversation as this has progressed, which sometimes happens with these ballot measures. So again, our job and our interest is just to provide the information as staff. But those have begun. And then there was a big step this last week. If folks here are part of Here Together or familiar with Here Together, they did release a letter I think we wrote it here as a compromise letter, wanting, recommending a measure to go forward and recommending various tenets of that. And again, we're trying to get out public information about what those recommendations would mean in actual dollars and impact to our system. Because I think that information might not be widely available right now. I also want to be frank that we don't have numbers. They are changing every day. You're going to see a very wide range of possible impact. And frankly, I don't know that Metro knows what the numbers are yet either, because there's still a lot of negotiations, deal making happening to determine who's going to get what portion of the revenue. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Can I just really quick?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say this as publicly as possible. So Here Together listed Project Homeless Connect is one of the agreeing agencies, and I have the email as proof that we are not. I asked them not to list us. We aren't even a member of Here Together at this point. We did not renew our membership. We are not the only ones. If you saw the, yeah, so just saying that out loud, just saying that out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, again, my role is to provide you information and facts, and I will try to stay on that line. I'll just acknowledge I used to be a coalition leader and very much can empathize with perspectives like that, Kim, and I appreciate you using the space for sharing that. Everyone is welcome to do that. My staff and I need to hold the line of sharing information. The measure, or sorry, the letter, Metro, or Here Together's letter, which you can easily find, it was printed in the Willamette Week on the day it was released. It's been shared widely, but here's a quick outline of some of the elements. There's very vocal support for continuing to focus on priority populations and prioritizing the existing homeless services. But also, I guess they use the word core SHS services. That's important for us to understand what that is meant, what is meant by that. There's also an interest in expanding eligible uses to include development of affordable housing. This comes from the expiration, or not the expiration, the end of available resources from the 2 affordable housing bonds that passed in 2016 and 2018, which is good news. It's good progress, but they're looking to replace that revenue stream. Another element is strengthening SHS oversight. This is just described for like a singular advisory and oversight body. Updates to our local implementation plans, which I think is frankly a great idea. It is time for us to update them. We do provide an annual update through our work plan, but nonetheless, it would be good to go back to the whole system again. Expanding Metro's role in implementing the affordable housing bond element, or sorry, the housing development parts, and also in their role of oversight. That this is what was described in, I'm sorry, specifically in describing SHS oversight. And then calling for a new independently and publicly funded watchdog, which was another element that was interesting about this letter. Also, I think many folks see that the upside of this compromise, this agreement, would be extending the sunset to 2050. And in making that compromise, the agreement would be to reduce, they call it tax relief. Let's remember that the taxpayers are high income earners and high grossing businesses. But the tax relief would be on specifically the income tax, indexing the threshold, which makes logical sense in tax policy, that what is a high income today of $125,000 is not going to be a high income in 2050 or whatever the year might be. So you index it like you would with any good tax policy. But in addition to the indexing, a recommendation for an immediate reduction by 1%. Now, 1% is effectively 10% of the current revenue. So let's be clear, because the current tax is 1%, I'm sorry, 0.1%. So a reduction by 0.1% from 1% to down to 0.9%, and that's an effectively 10% reduction in revenue. And then ultimately a further reduction down to 0.75%. So reducing the overall revenue by a quarter.
And that's yearly reduction in income?
Uh,
22 million, is that yearly?
Yes, sorry, in today's dollars, that would be an annual reduction in the revenue. And let me be clear, those numbers on the side are just Washington County's portion, not the overall portion. So that's Here Together's letter. And their thinking is that in order to preserve the measure, we need to create tax relief. And then we can agree with the business interests that are also at the table to a longer sunset for the measure. And then Metro's current proposal is at the next slide. Yes. And this is not written down yet, so I don't know where you could go reference this. We are translating what has been communicated through the conversations that our chair and others are having. And these numbers, I think the personal income tax items there, the rolled up number for region, the whole region. So before you were seeing Washington County numbers, and now here you're seeing, oh, that's confusing for me to say. Sorry, we are creating this information like on the hour for you all. So please don't get too attached to the numbers. They're changing a lot. So Metro is agreeing, yes, we'll extend the sunset. That's part of the deal. They're also thinking, yes, we need to index. They're also still evaluating levels of reduction. Those two bullets there are just referenced from the Here Together letter. This is the new element that was not in the Here Together. What we're hearing from Metro today is that they're thinking of capping the amount of money to homeless services programs in the 3 counties to 250. That number is changing. I've also heard 225. That's why there's such a large range. We're still learning and gathering information. We don't know if that would be an overall $22 million reduction a year, Jim, for Washington County, or as much as a $39 million reduction. For reference, our entire outreach system and shelter system costs about $20 million a year. So that is the enormity of the potential impact and why Molly came on and why we're getting out this information to you all. This would be a very significant reduction to the level of services we can provide. We're not proposing a reduction in just shelters. I'm just giving that for context. We would take a balanced system approach because we need to help people move through from homelessness to housing stability, but it is a significant amount of our annual operations to run the system of care that we've built. What is different, or maybe not different, but I think important to highlight is if they give us a flat amount, we no longer need to worry about operating a system at a reduced, more conservative capacity because we just have a known amount, right? So it's just these cuts, it's not the other cuts that we're already preemptively planning for. So we're basically planning for a future with 2 different iterations of a measure. One in which we have to manage for a conservative forecast or a forecast and a volatile revenue source. So we manage through conservative planning, and the other where we have a capped amount that is guaranteed, just significantly lower than what we're currently relying on. And then the part of the agreement or the proposal Metro is working towards is that after the counties got their cap of homeless services funding and after Metro took their portion for administration and tax collection, there would be a remaining balance that would adjust based on the revenue in theory, and that would be distributed to city partners for some of their projects and things that they want to do for homelessness, and then affordable housing development. We're still waiting for numbers. What I left a meeting this afternoon and heard is that they thought the amount for the cities would be somewhere in the amount of $3 to $5 million a year, and for affordable housing about $50 million a year. But when you put all those pieces together, it doesn't add up. A tax reduction, a set amount for county funding, and a range of money guaranteed for the cities and the affordable housing projects. So this is, in some ways, we're still at where we began this conversation a year ago. Is a lot that's being desired to be achieved with these 2 revenue sources that still don't add up in real numbers, and we're waiting for them so that we can share them with you all about what those impacts will look like for us. Next slide. In order to help describe what those impacts would be, please know this is for the descriptive purposes only. This is not this county staff getting out ahead and making plans for reductions. We would do this iteratively. We would do this through community partnership. We would do this over a period of time. It would mean significant reductions, and like all of these things would be on the table. If someone moved out of one of our permanent supportive housing placements, we could not guarantee that we could move the next person waiting in line into that unit, right? We would be looking at reductions of our system of many levels across many programs. We might not be able to maintain our commitments to capital investments already on the ground. We certainly would have to question future capital investments for access centers and transitional housing. Like all of these really big important efforts that we've been working towards together as a system for the last 3 years would be called into question, and we'd have to make some hard decisions.
Would you not be able to access, so they give you the operating budget and then they have the leftover that they're giving for housing. Could some of that money be used for the capital funds that you're talking about there?
In theory, down the road, but we've got projects that are ready to go out the door today, and we would be then in theory fighting in that, you know, we would be competing in a much greater pool that wouldn't just be for homeless services infrastructure, it would also be for the development of new affordable housing across the region.
Which is what they want.
So it would not, we would lose the amount of resources needed to serve the priority populations that we are currently serving. Good question. There's also a risk that the commitments made to keeping the focus on our priority populations, people experiencing homelessness and needing PSH, and even if they would build affordable housing with the dollars, it would all be for PSH housing. There's a real risk that the reduction in the portion for operating permanent supportive housing would be so severe that we would build housing that we could not then operate with permanent supportive housing because we would no longer have enough ARLO vouchers, and if there was that expectation, then we would only have to further reduce our other. So there's some real risks here in the promises that are being made about what can be achieved with less resource shared with more stakeholders or interests. So again, trying to share that information of how much $22 to $39 million in reductions would impact the current system we're operating today.
And just for something I heard that has stuck with me at Tuesday's Board of County Commissioners meeting, Molly made a great point around the irony that the affordable housing that Metro would be building, the clients that we currently serve would not actually be eligible for it.
Yeah, no be for population.
So just nuances like that.
Say that again.
The affordable housing that would be being built with this reform, the clients we serve would not be eligible.
Because?
They wouldn't meet the
You need to have income,
Yeah,
low
yeah.
income,
Oh.
and some
the
people
income
have no
thresholds,
income.
yeah, so.
Affordable housing often rents at, you know, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a unit. And the folks we're serving in homeless services need a voucher in order to be able to live in that unit. And if we're reducing the pot of resources that fund the vouchers, we can't serve the people we're serving. My next slide, thank you, Nadia, for helping us move along, is just where we're at today and some reference tools. I think this is all shared with you, so you can click on the links if you want to go see our board's work session 2 weeks ago. And then again, where are we, Thursday? On Tuesday. They've also submitted a letter officially to Metro responding to the proposals as far as we know them, right? It's like what's been communicated as the pending proposal. There's not yet a written documented proposal, but you can read the letter from our chair and on behalf of our board that has been sent to Metro. That's all public information when you go to these links. And the last point being that the board is asking us to share out this information. So as we have more numbers and real things that we can share with you, we will, but right now we're hearing scenarios that range from $22 to $39 million impacting our bottom line, our baseline services here in Washington County year over year. And the last slide these meetings are continuing. Everybody's having lots of conversations. That's where Molly was headed off to. And they're all working towards, you heard Molly describe, Marnie Kyle, our Assistant County Administrator, Tanya Angie, our County Administrator, are joining Nicole and I on Monday at 4 in a meeting with all the executive directors who partner with Washington County. There are about 25 organizations. Please help get the word out. We'll share all the information we can there. We're really trying to empower and inform the partners of what's at risk with these possible reforms. And then we are standing by for what is currently scheduled a December 17th Metro discussion, which may be a referral. It's probably going to be a further discussion and a referral in the new year sometime. I think that's unclear what timeline is, but Molly said earlier, in order to get on the May ballot, you have to have your measure referred sometime in February. So they do have a deadline. And I see where we're at time, or we're close to time. So I'd be happy to take questions, but I also want to turn the responsibility over to, or the mic back to Kim and Nadia to cover any other critical details for our meeting today.
Does anybody have a burning question? Nicole said it earlier, and it's true for me at least. Jess and Nicole respond very quickly to my emails, and I send them. So they're always available for follow-up questions, but if somebody has something right now that they need to ask, we have about 60 seconds.
I'm assuming that other than the Washington Council, you guys are asking other elected officials to also submit letters to Metro, because yesterday, the soon not mayor of Hillsborough is also in support of that. So I'm assuming that you guys are.
Yeah, we haven't talked about cities submitting letters yet, but we are having conversations about how ways to more engage the cities. Our county leadership talked to the cities, city managers Monday, was it? On Monday, they had a conversation with the city managers. I was in front of Hillsborough City Council on Tuesday to give an annual report presentation and stress this. And we've been bringing it up with the cities as well. And so I might connect with you offline about some other ideas we might be able to leverage the cities and our partner organizations.
I'm on it. You're beat, honey.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, we have a few quick updates that we want to get through. Thank you, Jess, for being here. Thank you. BNF already reviewed our housing forum, which is tomorrow morning. You did need to RSVP, so hopefully you did. We'll see everybody there. Last year, it was amazing is probably the word. It really impactful. So I highly recommend carving out the time for that in the morning. Our December luncheon is scheduled for Monday, December 13th. 16th, you're right, it's the 16th. I just say words. Which is just county staff saying thank you to all of us who are taking our time to be part of these conversations and engage in these councils and advisory committees and those types of things. So just a kind gesture to bring us all together and enjoy some food. Any more on that, Nadia?
You got it.
Great. Recruitment. I can try to do this quick. We are looking to recruit a few more folks for the Solutions Council. We're gonna have to punt this, I think.
Do you want some, it's a quick question we want to ask of, we're gonna work with Drew and Kim as your leadership of this body to vet applications in terms of who to advance to interviews, but we wanted to ask if any Solutions Council members wanted to participate in interviews.
Yeah, and I'll send out an email also because a lot of people aren't here right now, so.
Right. And I think the other question was just who else do we want at the table? What voices do we want represented so that we know as we get applications
I have the list that we
Great.
had in our previous discussion, so I'll send that out with the email to just remind everyone what we're looking for, and just also keep in mind that we can have two can be providers and then the others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the last piece was our bylaw conversation. We talked about this at our first meeting. This was going to be an ongoing conversation where we wanted to keep reviewing our bylaws, make adjustments as we saw needed. And we're there. We want to do that. So if you have some time, please review the bylaws, send any feedback to Nadia, and we will bring this conversation back to this group in the next few months to dive a little deeper into those bylaws and figure out where updates are needed. Perfect.
Looking at 15:30.
Right. Wonderful, you guys. Thank you so
This
much.
one's
Thank
always
you for your time. And we will see you soon. This meeting is adjourned.
If you guys want, I would love to sit on the interview panels if you guys end up needing somebody.
Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Conversations, that I had is to, maybe, I don't know, I think we don't have a cultural specific
Yeah,
organization.
that is on the list.
And I also
Perfect.
want to be